The glass in his hand was poisoned, and I was the one who had to serve it. Okay, that's not how the night started. The night started with tequila and my best friend K.H. Lowe shouting truth or dare over a poolsing bass line. It ended with me standing frozen in a service hallway, holding a tray with 2 glasses of amber whiskey, knowing one of them would kill the most dangerous man in New York. But let me rewind. 3 hours earlier, I'd kissed a stranger. It was a dare. Of course it was a dare. The bronze lantern was packed, the air thick with perfume and spilled beer. K.H. Lowe pointed across the room. Him, the most serious-looking man in the building, I dare you to kiss him. The man stood alone at the bar. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't watching the game on the TV. He was just still. Tall, broad, wearing a simple black shirt that stretched across shoulders that looked like they could carry the weight of the room. He held a glass of water, not whiskey. In a bar like this, that alone was a statement. He looks like he'd have me arrested, I said, laughing. Exactly, Maya grinned. That's the point. I'd had just enough tequila to feel brave and stupid at the same time. I slid out of the booth. For the plot, I muttered and walked over. Up close he was even more, not handsome in a pretty way, in a cut-from-stone way. A sharp jaw, clean-shaven, eyes the color of a winter sky scanning the room with a calm that felt out of place. He turned his head as I approached. Those eyes landed on me. They didn't roam. They didn't smile. They just absorbed. I didn't give myself time to think. I leaned in, pressed my lips to his, and pulled back in the space of a heartbeat. The kiss lasted 3 seconds. 3 seconds that changed everything. The bar noise faded into a dull roar in my ears. He didn't move. He didn't flinch. He just looked at me, not angry, not amused, interested, in a way that made my stomach drop to the floor. Sorry, I blurted, my voice too loud. Dare. I turned and walked back to my friends, my face on fire, his gaze burning a hole between my shoulder blades. That man was Dominic Russo, Manhattan's most feared mafia boss. And I, Emma Collins, an event planner drowning in student debt and roommate drama, had just put my lips on him like he was a party trick. I tried to forget about it. I danced. I drank water. I laughed too loud. But every time I glanced toward the bar, he was there, watching, not with a creepy stare, with a focused, unnerving calm. An hour later, I felt a presence behind me near the restrooms. I turned. He was there, Dominic Russo. You okay? He asked. His voice was low, smooth. It didn't match the chaos of the bar. Yeah, I said, my heart hammering. I mean, yes. He nodded slightly, his eyes flicking toward my table where K.H. Lowe was now pretending not to watch. Your friends look like trouble. They are, a beat of silence. I'm Emma. Dominic, he extended a hand. I took it. His grip was firm, warm, and completely controlled. He let go just as quickly. I didn't take offense, he said. You looked pretty calm. His mouth did a thing, not a smile, a slight curve. I noticed you didn't ask for my number. I raised an eyebrow. I noticed you didn't offer. A flicker in his eyes. Fair. My phone buzzed. K.H. Lowe, Uber's here, now. I have to go, I said. He stepped back immediately. Of course. I took a few steps, then stopped, looking over my shoulder. Sorry again for the kiss. For what? He asked. For kissing you. He held my gaze. It wasn't a mistake. 3 words. My breath caught. Then I turned and left, feeling his eyes on me all the way to the door. The next morning, my head was a war zone. I scrolled through the shaky phone video K.H. Lowe had sent. There I was, walking with a swagger I didn't own, leaning in, kissing the stone-faced man at the bar. The video paused on his expression. He looked intrigued, like I was a puzzle he'd just found. Why didn't he push you away? K.H. Lowe asked over speakerphone. I don't know, I groaned, burying my face in a pillow. Maybe he's nice. Maya's voice crackled through. Men who look like that, alone in bars, holding water, are not nice, Emma. They're either serial killers or CEOs, or both. At work, the office was its usual blend of floral candles and low-grade panic. I just sat down when Maya appeared at my desk divider, eyes wide. I found him. She held up her phone, a grainy photo from some society blog. It showed Dominic Russo exiting a black town car outside a sleek midtown building. Two large men in suits flanked him, their eyes scanning the street. "That's security," I said, my throat tightening. "That's money," K.H. Lowe corrected, leaning over. "Look at the caption. Philanthropist Dominic Russo at the Metropolitan Gala. He donated 6 figures to a hospital." "So he's a rich philanthropist who goes to dive bars alone," I said, trying to sound casual. "Rich philanthropists don't have bodyguards who look like they chew nails," Maya said, zooming in on one of the men. "They have polite guys in blazers. These guys look like they're waiting for a war." My phone buzzed on the desk, an unknown number. A text appeared. "Unknown, Emma Collins." My blood went cold. K.H. Lowe snatched the phone. "Answer it." "Me, yes, who is this?" The pause felt endless. "Unknown, Dominic." The office air vanished. Maya made a silent, screaming face. "Me, how did you get this number?" "Dominic," I asked. "Dominic, if that was inappropriate, tell me. I'll delete it. I won't contact you again." The respect in the text disarmed me more than any smooth line could have. "Me, why are you texting me?" "Dominic, because I didn't like the idea of never seeing you again." K.H. Lowe clutched my arm. "Oh my God, he's serious." "Me, what do you want?" "Dominic, one dinner. If you're not interested after that, it ends. No pressure." I looked at my friends. K.H. Lowe nodded furiously. Maya mimed putting on a crown. "Me, where?" "Dominic, Carbone tomorrow. 8 p.m., it's quiet." I knew Carbone. It was the kind of place where the pasta cost more than my weekly grocery budget, where you needed a reservation 2 months in advance. "Me, I'll meet you there." "Dominic, understood. I'll send the address. Thank you, Emma." "Thank you." The words sat in my chest, warm and terrifying. The following evening, I stood outside Carbone feeling like an imposter. I wore my one good black dress. He stood waiting under the awning, a silhouette of controlled power in a tailored charcoal suit. He saw me and stepped forward. "Emma," he said. My name in his mouth was a physical thing. "Dominic." Inside, the host didn't ask for a name. He simply said, "Right this way, Mr. Russo," and led us to a secluded booth in the back. I noticed 2 men in dark suits take up posts near the entrance. They didn't sit. They didn't eat. They watched. We ordered, sparkling water for both of us. "No wine?" I asked. "I don't like being less aware," he said. "Of what?" I teased lightly. "Someone stealing your breadsticks." His mouth twitched. "Possibly." The food came. We talked. He asked real questions about my job, my family in Ohio, why I chose event planning. He listened like my answers were the only thing in the room. During a lull, I gathered my courage. "The men at the door, they're with you." "Yes," he said, no hesitation. "Because you need protection." "Because I prefer control, Emma." I set my fork down. "What do you do, Dominic?" He swirled the water in his glass. "I run businesses." That's incredibly vague. It's intentionally vague. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Are you dangerous?" He met my gaze without flinching. "I can be." He paused, then added, his voice dropping. "But not with you." The air between us crackled. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of intense conversation and stolen glances. When we stepped out into the cool night air, He stopped under a streetlight. "Now I ask," he said, his voice gravel soft, "can I kiss you again?" "This isn't a dare," I whispered. "No," he said, "this is a choice." I nodded. He stepped closer, slowly. He cupped my face with one large, warm hand. Then he kissed me. It was nothing like the bar. This was slow, deliberate, deep, a claiming and a question all at once. When he pulled back, we were both breathing unevenly. "You're shaking," he murmured. "I'm not," I lied. "You are," he brushed a thumb over my cheekbone. "So am I." The admission shocked me. This man, this pillar of control, was affected. Then his phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again. He checked it, and I saw his jaw harden, his eyes turning to ice. He slipped it away. "Everything okay?" I asked. "It will be," he said, but his gaze was already scanning the street. A black sedan pulled smoothly to the curb across from us. The back window lowered. A man with a sharp face and cold eyes looked out. He nodded at Dominic, then his eyes flicked to me, assessing, before returning to Dominic. "Mr. Russo," the man said, his voice carrying across the quiet street. "We need a word." Dominic didn't move, but his hand came to rest lightly on the small of my back, a protective barrier. He never looked away from me when he answered. "1 minute." He looked down at me, his expression grave. "This," he said quietly, "is exactly what I was trying to warn you about." He reached into his jacket and pressed a plain white card into my hand. No logo, no title, just a name and a number. Dominic Russo. "Go home, Emma," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Take a cab, lock your door." "Dominic." "Please." The word was soft, but it was a command. "I'll call you tomorrow." He walked across the street toward the waiting car, his posture straight, his stride unafraid. The man in the car watched him, then his eyes found me again, lingering. I clutched the card, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I just wanted a funny story about a dare. But as the black sedan's window slid up, sealing Dominic inside with that cold-eyed man, I knew the story was over. The real one was just beginning. The cab ride home was a blur of streetlights and panic. I held Dominic's card so tight the edges dug into my palm. "Lock your door," he'd said. I did. Then I leaned against it, listening to the silence of my apartment as if it might tell me what happened after the black sedan drove away. My phone stayed dark. No texts, no calls. The silence was worse than any message. The next morning, I was a zombie at work. I stared at a spreadsheet about linen napkin costs while my mind replayed the cold eyes of the man in the car. K.H. Lowe took one look at me and steered me into the break room. "Talk now." I told her, the dinner, the kiss, the card, the sedan. "He gave you a go home and lock your door speech," Maya whispered, her eyes wide. "Emma, that is not normal first date protocol." "I know," I hissed. "But he also asked permission to kiss you," K.H. Lowe mused, stirring her coffee. "And he got your number by asking, not hacking. He's a paradox, a scary, respectful paradox." My phone buzzed on the table. We all jumped. "Dominic, are you safe?" 3 words. My shoulders slumped with relief so intense it felt like weakness. "Me, yes, are you?" A longer pause. "Dominic, I am. I need to see you tonight." "Me, is that a good idea?" "Dominic, no, it's a terrible idea, but I need to explain." I stared at the screen. A terrible idea. At least he was honest. "Me, where?" "Dominic, my home. It's the only place I can guarantee privacy." My heart hammered against my ribs. His home, the inner sanctum. K.H. Lowe read the texts over my shoulder. "His house? Absolutely not. That's how true crime podcasts start." "He could have just shown up here," I said quietly. "He knows where I live. He told me to lock my door because he already knew which door it was. He's giving me a choice. Maya chewed her lip. She has a point. Creeps don't give you an opt-out, they just creep. That evening, I stood outside a renovated brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. It wasn't a fortress. It was beautiful, understated, with warm light glowing behind tall windows. Dominic opened the door before I could knock. He looked exhausted. The controlled mask was still there, but cracks showed in the faint shadows under his eyes, the slight tension in his shoulders. He was in a simple gray sweater and dark jeans. He looked more human, more dangerous. "Emma," he said, stepping aside, "thank you for coming." The inside was all clean lines, soft textures, and art that looked curated, not bought. It felt calm. Lived in. Not what I expected from a man who rode in black sedans with coal-dyed associates. He led me to a living room with a deep sofa. "Can I get you something? Water, tea." "Tea," I said, needing something to hold. He returned with 2 mugs and sat not next to me, but in the armchair across the low table, giving me space. The boss was giving me space. The power dynamic was so confusing it made my head spin. "The man in the car," I started, unable to bear the quiet. "His name is Silas," Dominic said, his voice flat. "He's a business associate from a different time." He looked at me like I was a problem. "You are," Dominic said simply. He held up a hand before I could protest. "Not you, personally, what you represent, a distraction, a variable, a soft spot." The words "soft spot" hung in the air between us. "I don't want to be a weakness," I whispered. "You're not." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his gaze piercing. "You're a reason to finally do what I should have done years ago." "And what's that?" "Step away," he said. The words were final. "The life I've lived, it's not one that has room for someone like you, not if I want to keep you safe. So I'm making room. I'm creating a new one." The scale of what he was saying crashed over me. "You're talking about leaving the business." "The parts that matter," he nodded. "The parts that would put a target on your back, I'll keep the legitimate holdings. The restaurants, the real estate. The rest, I'm done." Just like that, because of one kiss in a bar. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Not because of the kiss, because of the woman who gave it, because you walked away without asking for anything, because you look at me and don't see a bank account or a weapon first." He paused, his voice dropping. "Because you make me want to be a man who deserves to be looked at that way." Tears pricked my eyes. I blinked them away furiously. This was too much, too fast, too real. "Dominic, you don't even know me." "I know enough," he said, his voice steady. "I know your character. I know your courage. The rest I want to learn. But I can't learn it if I'm constantly watching the door for threats I brought to your doorstep." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet, tree-lined street. "I have a meeting tomorrow with Silas and the others. I'm telling them my decision." A cold dread seeped into my stomach. What will they say? They'll argue, they'll see it as a loss of power, a betrayal. He turned to face me. "They might test me." "Test you how?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The grim set of his jaw said everything. I stood up, my legs unsteady. I walked over to him, stopping a few feet away. "And if you do this, if you walk away, what happens to us?" He looked down at me, his gray eyes stormy. "Then we get to find out what us looks like when it's not surrounded by men with guns." It was the first time he'd ever acknowledged the reality of his world so bluntly. Men with guns. "I'm scared," I admitted, the truth slipping out. "Good," he said softly, not unkindly. "You should be, but be scared with me, not of me. I will put every resource I have between you and the consequences of my past. That's my vow." He didn't reach for me. He waited. The choice, again, was mine. I stepped forward and placed my hand on his chest, over his heart. It beat strong and steady against my palm. He went utterly still, as if my touch was a brand. "Okay," I breathed. "Okay," he repeated, his voice rough. "Okay, I'm in, step by step, but you have to promise me no more secrets. If I ask, you answer." "I promise," he said without hesitation. Then his arms came around me, pulling me into an embrace that was nothing like the kiss. It was shelter. It was a fortress. I buried my face in his sweater and breathed him in clean cotton, spice, and resolve. He didn't try to keep me there. He drove me home himself, walked me to my door, and waited until he heard the lock click before leaving. The next day was agony. I jumped at every notification. At 4:17 p.m., my phone finally rang, a blocked number. "Hello." "It's done." His voice was tired but clear. "Done how?" I said what I had to say. I showed them the transition plan for the operations. I made it non-negotiable. And they just agreed. A short, humorless laugh. No, Sila's called me a sentimental fool. Another one implied I was going soft, but they agreed because the alternative is a war with me and they know they'd lose. He paused. There was a condition. My blood went cold. What condition? They want to meet you. The floor seemed to tilt. What? No, Dominic, no. I refused, he said, his voice turning hard. Absolutely and completely. I told them you are off limits, not a topic for discussion, not a piece on the board. That was the real test, and I passed. The relief was so potent it made me dizzy. He had stood between me and the wolves, and he hadn't budged an inch. So what now? I whispered. Now, he said, the tension easing from his voice, I'd like to take you to dinner. Somewhere loud and bright and completely ordinary. We went to a bustling Italian place in the village. No bodyguards at the door. No silent, watchful men, just couples and families and the clatter of dishes. He held my hand across the table. He smiled, a real, unguarded smile that transformed his face and stole the air from my lungs. This was the man underneath the boss. Funny, sharp, deeply observant. He told me about his mother, who passed away when he was young. About his love for classic cars he never had time to restore. He was building a person in front of me, brick by careful brick. Weeks blurred into a new rhythm. He was a man of his word. The shadowy presence that once clung to him began to recede. He sold off interests. He moved legitimate business fronts to the forefront. He started talking about a foundation, something for at-risk kids in the neighborhoods he'd once controlled in a different way. He began staying over at my apartment more and more. It was comical at first, this giant of a man in my tiny Queen's kitchen, trying to figure out my erratic coffee maker. He'd sit on my second-hand couch, filling the space with his quiet presence, reading reports on a tablet while I worked on event mood boards. One night, as we lay in the dark, his arm a heavy, comforting weight across my waist, he spoke into the silence. This is the most peace I've had in 20 years. What does it feel like? I asked. He was quiet for a long time. It feels like landing after a long fall, like I can finally stop holding my breath. It was in those moments I fell in love with him. Not with Dominic Russo, the myth, but with Dominic, the man who learned how I took my tea, who secretly replaced my dying plant with a healthier one, who listened with genuine interest when I explained the crisis of mismatched chair sashes. The past wasn't gone, though. It knocked sometimes. A late-night phone call he'd take in the other room, his voice a low, dangerous murmur. A news alert about a raid on a gambling ring we both knew was connected to his old world. He'd tense beside me, his eyes scanning the article, calculating fallout. One afternoon, a sleek envelope was slipped under my office door. No stamp, just my name typed on the front. Inside was a single, high-resolution photograph. It was me, taken 2 days prior, leaving my building and laughing at something on my phone. The angle was from across the street. A note was paperclipped to it. 5 typed words, a reminder of his past. I didn't panic. A cold, clear anger settled in my veins. I took a picture of the photo and the note and texted it to Dominic. Me received a postcard. His response was immediate, not a text. My phone rang. "Where are you?" His voice was calm, but it was the calm of a drawn blade. "At my desk, I'm fine." "Don't leave the office. Don't go anywhere alone. I'm sending Marcus. He'll be there in 10 minutes. You'll know him. Trust him." "Dominic who?" "It's a message from Sila's, a petty one. He's unhappy with the new shipping routes I authorized. This is his way of whining." The venom in his tone was new. "It will be the last message he ever sends you." True to his word, a man named Marcus, large, quiet, with kind eyes, appeared in our office lobby. He drove me home, then took up a discreet post in a car down the street. Dominic was already in my apartment, packing like a caged panther. The moment I entered, he crossed the room and pulled me into him, his embrace so tight it almost hurt. He buried his face in my hair. "I will burn his world to the ground for this," he growled, the vibration rumbling through his chest. "No," I said, pulling back to look at him. "That's the old way. You're building a new way. You said so." The conflict in his eyes was a raging storm. The instinct to protect through violence warring with the promise he'd made to be different. "He threatened what's mine," he said, the words primal. "I am yours," I said, holding his gaze. "And the way you protect what's yours now is with lawyers and contracts and the full weight of your legitimate empire, not with fire." He stared at me, breathing hard. Slowly, the storm in his eyes receded, replaced by a dawning, fierce pride. "You're right." He let out a long breath. "You're absolutely right." The next day, Silas's legitimate construction firm lost 3 major city contracts in a single afternoon. Rival businesses suddenly received anonymous tips about his OSHA violations. It was a dismantling, clean and ruthless, conducted in boardrooms and city halls. The message was clear. The boss was still the boss. He'd just changed his weapons. Silas fell in line. The photograph stopped. The incident changed something between us. The last barrier of pretense was gone. He'd seen my strength. I'd seen the true, terrifying scope of his power and his willingness to leash it for me. One evening, as we packed a picnic for the park, he watched me wrap sandwiches with a focused intensity. "What?" I asked, laughing. "Move in with me," he said. The plastic wrap slipped from my fingers. "What?" "Not to the brownstone. I'm selling it. Too many memories in those walls. I bought a place, a penthouse near the park. It has huge windows. A kitchen you'll actually like. A room for your brother to stay in when he visits." He spoke calmly, listing features as if discussing a business acquisition. But his eyes were fixed on me, vulnerable and hopeful. "Move in with me. Let me come home to you every night. Properly." Tears filled my eyes. This wasn't a possession. It was an invitation to build the home he'd never had. "What about my lease?" I managed to say. "I'll pay the break fee." "My terrible couch." "We'll donate it, with extreme prejudice." I laughed through the tears and threw my arms around his neck. "Yes, okay, yes." The move was fast. His new penthouse was breathtaking, light-filled, modern but warm. It felt like a fresh start, high above the city. We argued good-naturedly about art. He let me win. Life began to feel normal. Wonderfully, boringly normal. We had friends over, K.H. Lowe and Maya, who were now half terrified, half in love with him. We cooked together. We binged terrible TV. I thought the worst was behind us. We had navigated the threat. He had secured his exit. We were building our peaceful life in the sky. I was wrong. The past doesn't let go that easily. It waits. It watches from the shadows of the city below, and when it strikes, it doesn't come with a typed note. It comes with a gun. It was a Tuesday. I was leaving a late client meeting at a hotel in Midtown. Dominic was supposed to pick me up, but he'd been delayed by a conference call. "Take Marcus," he'd texted. "I'll meet you at home." Marcus was off that evening, dealing with a family thing. Dominic didn't know. I didn't tell him. I just wanted 5 minutes of walking in the city by myself, like a normal person. I told the new driver, Ben, that I'd walk a few blocks and call him. I was halfway down the block, enjoying the cool evening air, when a black van with tinted windows pulled up to the curb beside me. The side door slid open. A man I'd never seen before, pale, with a scar through his eyebrow, looked out. In his hand was a pistol, held low but unmistakable. "Get in the car, Miss Collins," he said, his voice bored. "Or this gets very loud." Time slowed. The sounds of the city faded. I saw the gun. I saw his empty eyes. This wasn't a photograph. This wasn't a warning. This was an abduction. The world narrowed to the dark mouth of the van and the barrel of the gun. My body went cold, then hot with a surge of pure adrenaline. Every piece of advice Dominic had ever given me flashed through my mind. Don't panic. Observe. Look for an out. The street wasn't empty, but it was dim. The few people nearby were looking at their phones, heads down. "I said get in," the man repeated, his voice a low rasp. My fight-or-flight instinct screamed. But another voice, calmer, colder, spoke in Dominic's tone. "If you get taken, you go where I can't find you. Make a scene. Here, now." I took a shaky step back, my heel hitting the curb. "No," I said, my voice trembling but audible. His eyes flickered with annoyance. He raised the gun an inch, a silent threat. I didn't think, I screamed. It wasn't a pretty scream. It was raw, loud, and ripped from the pit of my stomach. "Help, fire, somebody." I threw my whole body backward, stumbling off the curb into the street, still screaming. The move was so sudden, so uncoordinated, it threw him off. Heads snapped up. A man across the street shouted, "Hey!" The van's engine revved. The man with the scar swore violently, made a sharp gesture, and the door started to slide shut. They weren't prepared for a public spectacle. They needed quiet, quick, and clean. I had given them chaos. The van screeched away from the curb, tires smoking, and disappeared into traffic. I stood in the middle of the street, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. A woman ran over. "Oh my God, are you okay? Did that man have a gun? I'm calling the police." "No police," I gasped, the words automatic. "No police. Call Dominic." My hands were useless lumps of flesh. The kind stranger dialed 911 anyway. My phone rang in my purse. Dominic. I fumbled it out. "Emma, what's wrong? Ben said you weren't at the pickup point." His voice was sharp with instant alarm. "A van," I choked out. "A man with a gun, he tried to take me, on 54th. The line went silent for a half-second. When he spoke again, his voice was the quiet, dead-calm tone I'd only heard once before, the sound of a hurricane contained. "Where are you right now?" "On the street. A woman called the cops." "Give the phone to her, now." I handed the phone to the stranger. She listened, her eyes growing wide. "Yes, sir, I understand. I'll stay with her." She handed it back. "He said his security is 1 minute out. He said to tell you to look for a black Escalade." True to his word, 60 seconds later, the black SUV slid to a halt, and 2 of Dominic's men, not Marcus, but 2 others I vaguely recognized, burst out. They positioned themselves around me, their eyes scanning the street. "Miss Collins, we need to move. Now." They ushered me into the SUV. One of them spoke into a comms unit. "Package is secure. En route to the primary location. No police interaction." We didn't go to the penthouse. We went to a different building, a sleek, anonymous corporate tower in the financial district. They took me to a top-floor suite that was more like a command center than an apartment. Monitors lined one wall. Dominic was standing in the middle of the room, his back to me, talking in low, rapid Italian into a phone. He hung up and turned. The man I saw was not my Dominic. This was Dominic Russo, the boss in his most primal form. Rage poured off him in waves so potent the air felt charged. His face was a mask of cold fury, his eyes black with it. But his movements were precise, controlled, a predator who had caught the scent of blood. He crossed the room in 3 strides. His hands came up, cradling my face, his thumbs brushing over my cheeks as if checking for injuries. "Did they touch you?" "No," I screamed. "They ran." A muscle in his jaw ticked. "The license plate, did you see it?" I shook my head. "Tinted windows, New York plate, I think. The man had a scar here." I touched my eyebrow. The name was a snarl pulled from his throat. "Vincenzo!" He released me and turned to one of his men. "Silas's lapdog. This wasn't a grab. This was a declaration of war." He began packing, a tiger in a cage. "They've broken the peace. They've moved on what's mine. There are no more rules." He stopped and looked at me, the conflict from weeks ago completely absent. There was only certainty. This ends tonight, permanently. The old fear tried to surface, the fear of the violence that lived in his bones. But a new emotion was stronger, a righteous, burning anger. They had tried to steal me off the street. They had tried to shatter the peace we'd built. "What are you going to do?" I asked, my voice steady. He looked at me, surprised by my tone. What I should have done the moment I decided to leave, cut the head off the snake. "And then what? Another snake grows. It's what you said about the old way." "This is different. This is direct. This is for you." I walked to him and placed my hand on his arm. The muscle beneath was coiled steel. "Then let me be part of it." "Absolutely not." "Not with a gun," I said. "With a plan. You said you protect what's yours with lawyers and contracts now. So use them. You have his books. You know his dirty laundry. You own half the judges in this city. Ruin him. Don't kill him. Bury him so deep he'll never see sunlight again. Let him sit in a cell and rot, knowing the man he thought was going soft was the one who put him there." Dominic stared at me, a strange light dawning in his eyes. It was respect and something fiercer. Pride. "You want him in prison." "I want him to know he lost to you," I said, the words cold and clear. "And I want everyone who works for him to see that the new way is more terrifying than the old. The old way ends in a ditch. The new way ends with your life dismantled, piece by piece, in front of everyone." A slow, terrifying smile spread across Dominic's face. It was the most dangerous expression I'd ever seen on him. "That," he said softly, "is infinitely more cruel." For the next 6 hours, I sat in that safe room and watched Dominic Russo wage a war. It was a symphony of destruction conducted over phones and computers. He called in favors from prosecutors he'd kept out of scandals. He authorized the release of financial records to the IRS and the FBI, records that implicated Silas and his inner circle in fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering stretching back a decade. He directed his lawyers to file civil suits that would tie up Silas's remaining assets in endless litigation. He wasn't just attacking Silas, he was collapsing the entire ecosystem around him. By 2 a.m., we watched on a monitor as a live news feed showed FBI agents raiding 3 separate properties connected to Silas's operations. Dominic stood at the window, looking down at the city. "He'll be in custody by dawn. His soldiers will scatter. The ones with sense will come to me for jobs. The others will be picked off by rivals." He finally turned to me, the fury gone, replaced by a deep, weary gravity. "It's done." I went to him. He wrapped his arms around me, his body finally relaxing, the tension bleeding out of him. He rested his chin on top of my head. "You were magnificent," he murmured. "Your mind, it's a weapon I never expected." We stayed in the safe house that night. For the first time, I saw him sleep deeply, the lines of worry finally smoothed from his face. The last ghost of his old life had been exorcised, not with a bullet, but with the weapon I had given him, absolute legal annihilation. The fallout was swift and public. Salvatore Silas Provenzano was arrested at his Long Island estate at 5:47 a.m. The charges filled a scroll on the news ticker. His empire crumbled in a week. As Dominic predicted, some of his men, seeing the futility of loyalty to a lost cause, quietly reached out. They were vetted, and a few were given legitimate work in security or logistics. The message was received across the city. Dominic Russo was still the king. He just ruled from a different throne. Life returned to our new normal, but the air was clearer. The last shadow was gone. Months passed in a contented blur. One evening, we were in the penthouse. I was attempting to make lasagna, a disaster in progress. Dominic was leaning against the counter, sipping water, watching me with an amused expression. "It says simmer," I complained, reading the recipe. "What does that even mean? Is it angry? Is it happy?" He took the spoon from me, gave the sauce a slow stir, and adjusted the flame. "Like this," he said, his hand covering mine on the spoon's handle. A simple, domestic moment that felt more intimate than any kiss. After dinner, we sat on the wide sofa, the sprawling lights of Central Park twinkling below us. He was quiet for a long time, his fingers tracing patterns on the back of my hand. "Emma," he said, his voice quiet in the dark room. "That night in the bar, I was there because I just ended a partnership. A violent one. I was tired. I was planning the next 10 years of strategy, of holding territory, of constant vigilance. And then this beautiful, reckless woman kissed me." He turned to look at me. "You didn't just kiss me. You pulled me into a different future, one I didn't know how to want anymore." He reached into the pocket of his sweatpants, absurdly, and pulled out a small, dark blue velvet box. My heart stopped. He didn't open it, he just held it in his palm. "I don't have a speech, I just have a question and a promise." He opened the box. The ring was stunning, a flawless emerald-cut diamond, simple, elegant, and strong. "The promise is this: I will spend every day of my life being the man you saw I could be. The question is, will you spend your life with me?" Tears spilled over instantly. I didn't hesitate, I didn't need to. "Yes," I whispered, my voice thick. "Obviously, yes." He slid the ring onto my finger, his hands steady, his eyes shining with an emotion so raw it took my breath away. Then he kissed me, and it was a kiss of homecoming, of a journey ended and a new one beginning. Later, as we lay tangled together, the city silent below, I played with the ring on my finger. "You know," I said, "K.H. Lowe is going to say, 'I told you so' forever. She called you my future husband after the first date." He chuckled, the sound a warm vibration against my skin. "She's annoyingly perceptive." I turned to look at him, tracing the line of his jaw. "Do you ever miss it? The old life, the power?" He considered it. "I miss the clarity sometimes, the simplicity of a problem that could be solved with force, but I don't miss the man I had to be to live in it." He pulled me closer. This is the only power I want now, the power to come home to you." The wedding was small. Just K.H. Lowe, Maya, a few of Dominic's most trusted men, now legitimate executives, and my brother, who signed his congratulations with tears in his eyes. We said our vows on a terrace under a setting sun. Dominic's voice never wavered as he promised to love, honor, and protect me. He kept his vow. The foundation for second chances, which he'd started, became his primary focus. He built community centers in neighborhoods he'd once controlled through fear. The kids there didn't know him as the boss. They knew him as Mr. Russo, the quiet man who funded their music programs and asked about their grades. One afternoon, years later, we were walking through one of those centers. A little girl ran up to him, holding a bright, chaotic painting. "Look, Mr. Russo, it's you and Miss Emma." The painting was all purple and green swirls with two tall stick figures holding hands. He took it with the gravity of receiving a state document. "It's perfect," he said, his voice gentle. "Thank you." As the girl skipped away, I slipped my hand into his. He looked down at me, and in his eyes I saw no trace of the winter-gray stare from the bar. I saw peace. I saw home. He leaned down and kissed my forehead, ready to go home. I smiled, squeezing his hand. The hand of the man who had built a kingdom of peace from a life of war. The man who had been found by a kiss. "Yes," I said, "let's go home."